On January 8, 2026, President Donald Trump made a statement that shook the world. In a moment broadcast live to millions, he addressed the nation and the globe with words that would echo far beyond the walls of the White House. He declared that the only true limit on his power to use military force was his own morality and mind. No law, no treaty, no outside authority would ultimately restrain him. Only his personal sense of right and wrong. This bold claim placed his personal judgment above international laws and agreements. It was a statement that challenged the very foundation of global diplomacy and the systems designed to keep peace. Instead of relying on treaties or global norms, Trump declared his conscience as the final check on American military might. He made it clear that, in his view, the president's inner compass was more important than any written rule. The world reacted with concern, questioning what it means when one leader's beliefs guide decisions that affect millions. News outlets buzzed with analysis, and foreign capitals scrambled to interpret the new reality. Traditionally, leaders are expected to follow established rules, not just personal conviction. International agreements and legal frameworks exist to prevent chaos and ensure accountability. Trump's words signaled a shift. American foreign policy would now be shaped by his individual sense of right and wrong. This raised urgent questions. Could one person's conscience truly guide a superpower responsibly? How would the U.S. act on the world stage? Would allies and adversaries trust American intentions or fear unpredictable decisions? What would Trump's morality mean for global peace? Could his personal values prevent conflict, or might they spark new tensions? For English learners, this is a lesson in the difference between rule-based systems and those led by personal judgment. It's a real-world example of how leadership style can change the course of history. Imagine a game where one player ignores the rulebook and follows their own idea of fairness. Suddenly, the outcome is unpredictable. The other players are left uncertain, unsure of what to expect next. Trump positioned himself as that player in international relations. He stood apart, signaling that he would not be bound by the same expectations as others. His statement wasn't just theory. It explained past actions and hinted at future ones. The world had already seen examples of his willingness to act unilaterally. Now the world watches to see what his morality will allow, or restrain, as he leads the U.S. through uncertain times. The consequences of this approach are still unfolding, and the world holds its breath, waiting to see what comes next. When a leader claims their own morality is the only limit, the rules that guide international behavior start to blur. Suddenly, what is right or wrong on the world stage depends on one person's perspective, not on shared values or established agreements. Predictability in global affairs disappears, leaving diplomats and nations unsure of what to expect next. This confusion can lead to miscalculations and even conflict, as countries struggle to interpret shifting intentions. Countries usually rely on shared rules and treaties to create stability, building trust through decades of careful negotiation and compromise. But Trump's approach leaves others guessing, as he often disregards these norms in favor of his own judgment. This uncertainty makes the world more anxious and unstable, with markets and citizens reacting to every unpredictable move. Trump's America First morality prioritizes U.S. interests, favoring strong, quick action over international consensus. He often frames decisions as battles between winners and losers, rather than opportunities for cooperation. He values strength, loyalty, and decisive results, rewarding those who support him and sidelining critics or dissenters. Often he acts alone rather than with allies, making decisions that can isolate the U.S. from traditional partners. This shift from multilateralism to unilateralism could inspire other nations to do the same, weakening institutions like the United Nations, and making global cooperation harder to achieve. The post-World War II order, built on cooperation and collective security, is directly challenged by this philosophy of personal morality. Some see this as effective leadership, cutting through slow bureaucracy with bold, clear decisions that get results quickly. But many fear the risks: unchecked power, shifting personal morals, and a world where peace and stability depend on one person's private beliefs, rather than on collective agreements. Without shared rules, global security becomes fragile, and the potential for misunderstanding or escalation grows. The fate of millions could hinge on the changing conscience of a single leader, reminding us how much the world depends on the values and choices of those in power. Trump's philosophy became reality in January 2026, when he ordered a major military raid in Venezuela. U.S. forces captured President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, violating Venezuela's sovereignty. The Trump administration justified this as a moral act, removing a corrupt leader accused of narco-terrorism. Critics worldwide condemned the operation as a dangerous precedent, arguing that no country should invade another to capture its leader. This action prioritized Trump's sense of rightness over international law, raising fears of similar interventions by other powers. After the raid, Trump announced the Donroe Doctrine, putting U.S. control over Venezuela's oil exports. Many saw this as a move toward colonialism, not liberation. The administration claimed it would help Venezuelans, but others called it a power grab. The world now faces the consequences of a leader acting on personal morality, not global rules. The Venezuela raid was just one example of Trump's assertive foreign policy. Over the past year, the U.S. launched strikes in Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen, often without broad international support. Trump's approach favors direct action over diplomacy, treating global affairs like business deals. He even revived interest in acquiring Greenland, straining relations with Denmark and NATO allies. Regional leaders, like Colombia's president, now fear U.S. intervention. Trump's skepticism of alliances like NATO and his "I alone can fix it" doctrine have made global cooperation uncertain. America's traditional partners are left questioning their security. The world is adjusting to a U.S. that acts first and consults later. International law is a set of rules and treaties that countries agree to follow, aiming to prevent war and protect sovereignty. Unlike domestic law, there's no global police force. Enforcement depends on cooperation and mutual respect. The United Nations Charter allows military force only in self-defense or with Security Council approval. These rules were created after World War II to make the world safer and more predictable. But powerful countries can often ignore international law with few consequences. When Trump dismisses international law, he challenges decades of shared efforts to keep peace. The debate is whether this imperfect system is better than letting the strongest do as they please. The world must decide if rules matter more than raw power. After World War II, America played a pivotal role in shaping the modern international system. The U.S. was instrumental in founding the United Nations and championed a vision of global cooperation, peace, and shared rules. This leadership helped establish a framework where nations could resolve disputes and work together on global challenges. However, despite its role as a global architect, the U.S. has often chosen to act outside international law when its own interests were threatened. This pattern stretches back decades, long before the Trump era, revealing a complex relationship with the very rules it helped create. For example, the United States never joined the International Criminal Court and has frequently ignored or dismissed international rulings that it found unfavorable or inconvenient. But Trump's second term marks a dramatic escalation of this approach, taking it to new and unprecedented levels. He has openly rejected international organizations and treaties, choosing to act more unilaterally than any recent president, and often dismissing the value of multilateral cooperation. On January 8, 2026, Trump ordered the U.S. to withdraw from 66 international organizations, many of which are closely linked to the United Nations and play key roles in global governance. He argued that these groups no longer serve American interests, insisting that the U.S. must prioritize its own sovereignty, even if it means weakening global cooperation and trust. America's allies now worry that this shift emboldens rivals like Russia and China, who may see an opportunity to expand their influence. If the United States ignores the rules it once championed, why should any other nation feel compelled to follow them? The credibility of the entire system is at stake. The result could be a world where powerful nations act without restraint, increasing the risk of conflict, instability, and a breakdown of the order that has kept relative peace for decades. America's stance on international law doesn't just affect its own future. It shapes the entire global order and the way nations interact. When the U.S. shifts its position, the world feels the impact, economically, politically, and in terms of security. In this new era, the stakes for global stability and cooperation have never been higher. Trump's disregard for global rules mirrors his approach to domestic law. He's the only U.S. president impeached twice, accused of abusing power and inciting the Capitol attack. Legal troubles followed him into his second term, including dropped federal charges and a New York conviction. He's used government power aggressively, even against political opponents and protesters. This pattern, pushing legal boundaries and challenging institutions, shows his philosophy rules are obstacles, not principles. Trump's belief that his own morality is the only limit is consistent at home and abroad. The core debate: should leaders follow personal conscience or global rules? Supporters of personal morality argue it allows decisive action against evil, even when international law is slow or protects bad actors. They see Trump's actions, like the Venezuela raid, as morally necessary, not illegal. A strong leader's conscience, they say, can stop atrocities when the system fails. Critics warn that personal morality is subjective and dangerous. What one leader sees as just, another calls aggression. If every leader acts on personal beliefs, chaos follows. Russia, China, or others could justify invasions as moral. International law, though imperfect, sets a baseline for peace and dialogue. It forces leaders to justify actions to the world, not just themselves. Relying on one person's judgment is a gamble with global consequences. The system of rules exists to protect the world from the mistakes or ambitions of any single leader. Trump's claim that his morality is the only limit challenges the foundation of the global system. Some praise his bold, direct style, trusting his judgment over slow international bureaucracy. Others, including longtime allies, fear a world where might makes right and rules are ignored. If the U.S. abandons shared laws, others may follow, risking more conflict and abuse. The central question: who decides what's right, individual leaders or a system of international laws? There's no easy answer, but the future of global order depends on finding a balance between personal power and shared principles. The world's stability may rest on how we answer this challenge.